Checking back in with State Representative Jackie Chan of Quincy, who is back in his dining room and as opposed to behind the wheel of his car. Hi, Jackie.
Hey, Joe. Yeah, we're back to the familiar settings today.
That's right. This time I moved. I'm in a different studio today. Try and keep people guessing.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, even though we're still living in hopefully the tail end of a COVID world, but who knows? We like to have some consistency so we don't shock people too much when we're on when you broadcast this later today or Saturday morning.
That's right. Well, we want them to know it's a new show at least, so change it up a little bit. Speaking of COVID, what do you think of the governor's latest announcement on lifting some of the restrictions?
I think it's a degree of optimism, right? I mean, obviously, the theoretical safety zone on herd immunity is 70%. Obviously, it becomes less theoretical, greater we get on herd immunity, 70%. And given, in fact, vaccination numbers in Massachusetts is about 50% plus first shots and about closing in 30% second shots, we think we can get closer and closer herd immunity. And our surrounding neighbors are actually doing pretty well. I mean, states around us is getting to 50% plus first shots, and some states like Rhode Island and Maine have already got 30% second shots. What is a little concerning right now is the slowdown of appointments. Remember early on, vaccine was insufficient and demand was high, and I was getting a lot of constituent emails and calls and social media looking for assistance on shots. That stopped. I am not getting any emails or calls anymore looking for how to get a shot. Why don't we have enough vaccine? And I would have to explain about the fact that we don't know when we're getting a vaccine. The vaccine supply is so inconsistent. Some days we get nothing. Some days we get a little bit. And this kind of crazy challenge on that. And remember, the portal was a disaster zone. But now people can just do it through CVS on their own. CVS Beale Street has plenty of vaccine. Make an appointment ahead. And it'll take care of you. So, I mean, it's really a big change from not even a month ago, where, I'm trying to explain to folks why we don't have vaccine available because we literally didn't have any. And I can't make biotech make them faster or get them onto a truck and drive them to you faster, right? I mean, I get the frustration and anger, but I'm kind of like, what can I do here? We're subject to the mercy of the manufacturing distribution system. So now that's less of a case. And I know Johnson & Johnson came back on as approved of warning, which, again, I encourage everybody to pick a vaccine. If it's available, take it. But it looks like you can pick a vaccine for now. But it's also a little troubling in a slowdown because, again, we want to get to 70% second shots or Johnson & Johnson first shot, fully vaccinated sooner than later. And it'll make us more comfortable opening the economy. I don't want us to go backwards. We've already done that once. So I know the governor's being very aggressive here on reopening, but I still have a degree of caution here that it still requires participation by you all listening to me to make what the governor wants works.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of discussion about the way the vaccine was rolled out, these mass vaccination sites as opposed to the regional sites or even the local sites, and that'll have to be hashed out, I'm sure, in the days and weeks and months ahead. But do you think it worked overall?
Overall, the results speak for themselves, despite, you're right, a lot of hiccups. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you folks. It was not good. I mean, even then, the vaccination sites require car transport.
Yeah.
Also was challenging until Fenway came up and you could, a real dense urban area in Boston. And of course, their inability to maximize community health centers and ignoring boards of health at one point was not encouraging. Even if we had limited supply, at least you had the infrastructure set up so we're ready to go. And they kept kind of changing the rules every couple of weeks, and it started making us all batty. But then again, I mean, we're trying to get to results here, and people taking their own initiative to make this happen helps. And the hospitalization numbers are down. The death count has gotten below double digits consistently for the first time. And our ICUs are less strained than ever. So people who are looking for like that hip surgery, which was considered non-essential because it's not life-threatening, well, maybe we'll get that treatment done sometime this summer, if not sooner, if hospitalizations continue to go down. I still believe that to be ready at COVID, ready at some level. I still believe that, Worcester DCU, the Boston Convention Center, and other locales will be on standby regardless. I think it'd be foolish of us not to keep and it's going to cost us money, folks, but I do think it's useful to keep some stuff on standby. We're not going to give up any ventilators, put it that way, right?
Right.
Just in case. And I don't want that in case to become real.
Yeah, well, the vice president's already talking about we should be getting ready for the next pandemic, which is a little unsettling, but she's got a point.
It's the variant problem.
Yeah.
This thing has mutated so quickly, and it mutated quickly from small harmless mutations to, hey, we're going to just try to kill you faster mutations.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the vaccination is such a big concern, because if we can't keep the vaccinations up, and when these variants mutates to be even more infectious and starts a wave, despite the fact it isn't that different in terms of treatment, I mean, the vaccine will take care of it. It is not enough vaccinations done. Yeah, you have that potential wave 4 or 5, depending whose math they're using, to have, let's say, 40% of your population that isn't vaccinated in complete and total meltdown, which still at that level will crash your hospital system. Your healthcare system will crash. Even if it's 10% of the population, you still gonna have a crash system.
Yeah, not to mention what's going on in like India and other parts of the world as well. They're in a much different place than we are.
Yeah, India's death rate is 1 every 4 minutes now from COVID is the rough count. We believe there's undercounting because of record keeping. Like in the United States, obviously the counts were not, 100% accurate. We have to admit that, right? That the tests and the death rates were probably some were misdiagnosed, or some were never logged in as a COVID at the beginning. So let's be frank about that. But I mean, the numbers in this country, I think, are accurate enough that we have a good sense. India, I think, is challenging. Brazil's another country that's in the midst of meltdown.
Mm.
And I know over 530,000 people have died of COVID in this country. But I mean, imagine dying one every 4 minutes now.
Yeah, it's truly a human tragedy that's going on for sure. And I know that they're trying to get vaccine distributed. I think Moderna just this week announced they're hoping to get 3 billion doses by 2022 around the world. And I'm sure the other companies will step up as well.
Yeah, vaccine is a bit of an interesting thing. I think the public doesn't appreciate as much as I think us who are a little close to it does. I mean, this is the biotech capital of the planet in Massachusetts, right? Let's be frank about this, right? We got 3 vaccine manufacturers here. We're probably going to get perhaps 2 more vaccines by summer's end. Europe has AstraZeneca, a British company. They're likely to get probably 1 more or 2 more vaccine development by end of this year. China has Sinovac, and they got 5 on approval wait list in the Chinese government. And that's pretty much it for the world, folks.
Yep.
Unless you want to count Sputnik in Russia, which frankly I don't think anybody trusts. But besides,
I don't think we know enough about that one. Yeah.
Yeah, no one knows what that one works. Let's put a political statement on that one out there. But I mean, the biggest country manufacturer of vaccine is actually India, for example. India is a huge manufacturer, despite the fact that it's not a biotech center. So they make a lot of AstraZeneca. Part of the deal in India was they get to buy first crack at AstraZeneca. The problem is that countries like China and India are playing vaccine diplomacy, and Russia. So those 3 countries are giving away vaccine to poorer countries who don't have vaccine access or can't afford vaccine access at the front of the queue in exchange for diplomatic favor. And as you can see in India, this has hugely blown up on them. Playing vaccine diplomacy at the expense of your own citizenry is problematic. So we're back at what we call put the life mask on you first on airplane safety, right? They always say put the mask on first. And there is going to be criticism about the United States and Europe and other first world countries that have a lot of money, because we do, and we have a lot of technology and such to make vaccine for ourselves first. And then, South America, for example, is not going to get a lot of vaccines soon, even though we probably should be vaccinating them quickly because of the fact of geography to us. Same thing with Canada and Mexico. Neither one has vaccine manufacturing, and Canada has money, but they're so below us on the queue because of the fact that we bought so much early on. They have to wait till we're done first. And the government here bought vaccine at 4 times the amount we normally need as a precaution. And what do I mean by that? Wealthy countries like the United States can buy from multiple manufacturers in advance in disgusting amounts, just in case there's a failure in one of the vaccines in phase 3. So
Okay.
let's say Moderna fails, even though we bought like, $1 billion of Moderna, just picking a number. Let's say, for example, bought $1 billion of Moderna and we turn out phase three doesn't work, but we bought it in advance. But we also bought a whole lot of AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, and Pfizer
Yeah.
in billions of dollars in advance. So if they pan out, we get first crap.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. That's why the pause in the J&J vaccine didn't have a huge impact here, right?
That's correct, because we were so far ahead of the queue of everybody else by over purchasing on purpose,
Right.
just in case one of the manufacturers doesn't work. I don't think the public really kind of appreciates that kind of belt and suspender approach that this
It's
country is.
hoarding, essentially.
Oh, it is a type of hoarding, absolutely. But it's a belt and suspender approach because, I don't know, the infection rate is the highest on the planet and we have 500,000 people dead.
Right.
The EU adopted the same mentality as the AstraZeneca. They try to keep it there. But, manufacturers like the factories in India that are AstraZeneca factories, the Indian government, because of the location, got first dibs.
Yep.
But they exported it out as diplomacy matters. And now they're at a shortage of oxygen in India. And, I don't know if people have the stomach for it, but just look up any of the videos out there. I mean, they have funeral pyres in parking lots practically. People literally dying in their cars trying to get to the hospital when they turn around. People are literally trying to get, any kind of small oxygen tank just to keep oxygen going into the loved ones, in a parking lot. I mean, it's insanity. But their healthcare system's completely failed. Brazil's in the same position. They won't be far behind.
Let's change gears a little bit if we can, Tacky. I mentioned at the beginning of our chat that you appeared on Channel 5 earlier this week. Channel 7, I know, has approached you as well for some comments about anti-Asian racism. And it's something that I know you're passionate about and have experienced firsthand. And you've always said talking about it is the first step. So is this a good first step?
It very much is so. I mean, racism isn't new. I mean, I think we all accept that, but I think it's whether you acknowledge it is question one. And the question is, do you actually see it in front of you? Channel 5 WCVB, I have to say, did an incredible job on that segment. It was 55 minutes long as part of Chronicle on community issues. And I think it's the first time I can ever think of our story being told. I mean, we're invisible society, but it's not entirely our fault. And this is kind of what I keep repeating itself. It's like, it's not all on us. Is that when we're ignored, it's suddenly our fault we're ignored, despite the fact that we're trying to let you know we're here. And Channel 5 provided an enormously useful education about Asian Americans in Massachusetts. We've been here since 1880 as a demographic, and we're not all the same. Right? It was incredible that they brought people from the Indian community, the Vietnamese community, other communities that, frankly, we don't look alike at all. We don't have any common culture, no common religion. We don't have any of those intersectionalities, unlike other demographics. So, I mean, it was very emotional for me to just kind of like, oh my God, for the first time, someone knows we're alive. And I encourage everyone to go to WCVB's website and the Chronicle page to watch some of the clips. I kind of wish they did it all as, back in one 55-minute segment that you could put and just watch it through. But
yeah,
you can watch some of those clips. And, my message was very simple. I mean, as an Asian American, leader, we have to lead. I don't know how simple it is. I can't wait for somebody else to lead for us, whether a person is Latino, Black, or white. I mean, Asian Americans are dying. We've been suffering the longest through COVID. We're in month 16 of suffering, on a national level. And it's up to, leaders in the community and people like myself to say, hey, we've got to represent our interests. You can't sit around and wait for someone else to help you.
Well, I kind of equated to, the acknowledgement of the LGBTQ community here in Massachusetts when they won the right to get married, and it's an acknowledgement that you matter, that you are important and that you're real.
Yeah, absolutely correct. I mean, I was around for the right to marriage at the state. I was working for Michael Morrissey, so people forget I've been around a lot of protests, a lot of controversial issues, and I do know a lot of the different point of views on a lot of different things because of so long I've been doing this now. And I have a strange memory, as people know me, remembering all kinds of things. But you're absolutely correct. I mean, if they didn't advocate for themselves, then they would have been left behind and become an invisible community. And even when Asian Americans advocate, we still are somewhat of an invisible community. But I will tell you this, in other media outlets, this issue of Asian racism has pretty much gone away. And I've been very impressed that this deep in post-Atlanta shooting, we're still having conversations here in the State House among community people and in the media. In the Channel 7 poll yesterday that came up, showed 77% of Asian Americans believe there's systemic racism in Boston. These are Boston residents. I do believe that poll may be a little bit lower than 77%, but still very high for Asians that did it statewide, more so than Blacks and Latinos. And it's a reflection of the fact that two things. One, we always believe it was there. I always figured it was going to be in the high 60s anyway. But I think once hit this heightened pandemic situation of COVID-19 and all the attacks on us everywhere, and also locally more verbal abuse, more just disruptive acts. I mean, straight up racist behavior, and the lack of visibility with us regarding other peoples of color. This whole past summer about racial justice, and we're not seen. This hasn't been lost, and that's part of systemic racism, is to just basically just ignore us, and then not actually trying to figure out what our concerns on and engage. For example, police reform, which everyone knows I was not that warm with. One of the big problems of police reform conversation was I was not allowed to be part of that conversation and I know this COVID format doesn't help, but the governor's office never once approached the Asian community. Right? Not even once, not even called, not even asked. I'm the most senior person of color in Democratic leadership. I mean, we have a sizable caucus in the House. With 7+% of the population, is the fastest demographic, largest immigrant demographic is Asian American immigrants. And the governor's office was like, well, whatever. I mean, you're not relevant. And I had to work backdoor channel through my friend Carlos Gonzalez, who chairs the Black Latino caucus, to find out what was really going on. My choices are either I can go down and bust down the door and be a pain in the butt to the governor, or try to be respectful of the process. And given that COVID made it extremely difficult to have in-person conversations, very difficult to operate normally, it became a very interesting political and like personal safety and operational question, how we're going to manage that.
Well, I think the old adage is true, is the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right?
But only if someone listens to the wheel.
Yeah.
This is a two-phase component. I mean, I listen to a lot of squeaky wheels, and you know who you are if you're watching this. And I do pay attention. I just have problems remembering everything these days as I'm getting older. That's my challenge, trying to remember it all. But yeah, I mean, you still need to listen to the wheel exists. I mean, it's like healthcare. You have a little creak. You don't think about it. Then you see a little bump. You don't think about it. Next thing you know, you got cancer, because you weren't paying attention to it, even though all the signs of pain, aches, and visual distortions were there. Same principle. It's just with people.
So does there need to be legislation then, do you think, to this end?
Well, I continue to push my data disaggregation, though. Again, if we don't know what we look like, how can we serve the people? We want to be an open government. We have to know what we look like. If you don't know what we look like, then how do you serve them? Right? The hate crimes bill we're still working on. It does need help. I did an editorial letter on Monday's Globe about it and try to really simplify the matter of what the problem is. The problem is sex addiction in Atlanta. He's trying to avoid a hate crimes charge by claiming his intent wasn't to murder Asian people, despite the fact that he stalked the location the day before, despite the fact that racial slurs used that was not reported in the media. It was reported by secondary media. There wasn't national news. Local media and local papers and Korean newspapers covered it heavily because there were Koreans killed. Mm-hmm. Korean journalists heavily covering that story. So he was trying to avoid a charge. So if you look at the totality of the circumstances where he stalked the place, he picked his victims, he knew exactly where he was going to go, it was very systematic, that's a hate crime. But under the hate crime statute, the fact he just came out and said sex addiction, which in itself is ludicrous, he now created an affirmative defense against a hate crimes charge.
Okay.
And since only intent driven, this is not hard for defense attorneys and criminals that have, smart enough, and there are enough smart to figure out how to use these defenses, to avoid hate crime charge. So, for example, you could continually, attack a black family over and over again, but you won't claim the intent is because they're black. You're going to claim that the intent is, what's a good defense? They can always claim the defense is that they have schizophrenia.
Okay.
No, maybe he doesn't have schizophrenia, but you don't know. But the cops won't charge him with hate crime. And once the charge is not attempted, they won't revisit the issue unless they're forced to revisit the issue. And in most instances, local police departments will not revisit unless they have a lot of pressure to do so. And once that door is closed, which is what makes us nervous now in the community, is that even though it may not rise to the level of hate crime, dismissing it immediately makes us extremely nervous right now.
Yeah, it kind of takes the winds out of the sails, basically.
Yeah, because it means they have a body looking into the whole situation to find out would this be the case. So we need to clarify the hate crime law to, let the police know you can look at the whole situation here, not just one little element of the crime, to see if it's there or not. Now, it may not be there.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong. No, I'm not saying every crime is a hate crime, but we do think that police officers should have the legal ability to say, hey, let's look at the whole situation here. And is it reasonable for a person to believe, based on the totality of the circumstances, the whole situation, is this a hate crime? And let the cops figure it out. But give them a chance, give them a tool to at least look at the whole thing, as opposed to a statute that says you just have to look at one element, which is, what is the person thinking? And I just scream out anything, other than the fact that I hate that racial or that gender or that sexual orientation. I just scream anything out, and I avoid the hate crime charge.
Yeah. I see. Okay, so it's closing that loophole, basically, is what it's trying to do.
It's closing an affirmative defense.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and because the underlying charge will always be there. So if it's assault and battery with hate crime, those are two separate charges. But the underlying offense will always be there. Its question is, does a whole underlying offense, all the elements, meet the level of hate crime? Can they show intent through all the totality of behavior?
Yeah, it's the intent part that's the difficult part.
Yeah, because the action, generally we can, police can figure it out on their own, right? And it gives it to the district attorneys, to do this, and then it also gives some data sets. So one of the problems we have is low data. So the Shadow 5 investigative reporting team correctly points out that places like Lowell, for example, has no hate crimes. That's impossible. Almost 50% of that city of over 100,000 people are people of color. It's closing at 50%. It's just not possible. I mean,
can we talk a little bit, speaking of populations, it just reminded me about the census numbers, the initial preliminary census numbers that came out, I think it was earlier this week, actually, and what that means for Massachusetts.
But it's optimistic because, one, we don't lose a congressman, which is great, because I was around for the last congressman exit, which involved, I heard through the grapevine, very unpleasant conversations with Representative Oliver at the time. And there was a lot of unhappy conversations in Western Mass to make that seat go away, to get us from 10 to 9. So maintaining 9 seats, of course, is extremely important. And it keeps our standing in the House. And we don't have to figure out how to disassemble a whole congressional district, which is good. The number is about 7 million. Which is good, because the 2019 projection had us closer to 6.8 something million.
Yep.
So the fact that we are ahead of the 2019 projection using Rio is good. Now, we need that data to come down at a smaller level so the city of Quincy can break up their precincts properly, equally. Right. And then I can get working in my own district after the breakup. But I'm on the ocean, so it's not like I can go anywhere, people. It's one of the drawbacks of being a border community, whether it be the ocean or against another state. It's not like you can do a whole lot of creative things unless you're going to try to get me to Provincetown by binoculars.
Well, let's start building on the Boston Harbor Islands or something, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I can stay on a Nut Island with a pair of binoculars and start to see what towns I can take on the edges. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing. I mean, so obviously this is important local level, because I know people like to be able to vote where they can walk to. Take that up with your city councilors, please. Don't call me.
Yep.
please take up your city councils if you feel that you cannot get to your polling place and would like some convenience. They're the ones to get the vote on those precinct lines, and then I just have to deal with whatever they send me. So I've talked to the chairman of redistricting in the House, Chairman Mike Moran. We have two Morans. Well, actually, no, three. We have a Senator Moran, which is my co-chair. So Mike Moran, and he informs me that we're going to try to make the November deadline, because to run for the House of Representatives, by Constitution, you have to live in the district for one full year from the prior election.
Oh, okay.
So the goal is to get a district drawn and put into law before election day this November.
Okay. So that's an ambitious goal for sure. You'll need the accurate numbers to do that.
Yeah, which means we need the cities and towns to start looking at what they think the projections are on the local precinct lines are.
Right. Yep.
And maybe they can tweak the edges, but they got to get these maps going now. And then we need those maps. So right now they're using the existing precinct lines as their guidepost. But I know that's not going to be completely accurate, because we know High Point grew, so that high area on Quarry Street is going to shrink on mine. Same thing in Quincy Center. Very little development in Housenick and Germantown compared to the center parts of the city.
Right.
So expectation is that they're going to have to move those lines out of the peninsula heading for Quincy Center. So it isn't hard to figure out if you just drive around and see all the new development changes in housing, and because of population growth, those lines will shrink, and then no growth areas will have to push their lines out.
Right. Yep. To keep everything equal. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The city did a very good job in keeping all the precincts very close to equal.
Any news in the State House this week that we should know about, Jackie?
No, but went at 2:30 in the morning yesterday to finish the budget. So, it was actually Thursday morning, 2:30 in the morning.
Wow.
So we did get through the budget. The delegation again did extremely well in the budget. I mean, we got some money for state police patrols during the summertime on Crenshaw Drive and Frenchbrook Parkway. We would get some money for Quincy Asian Resources as well as Germantown Neighborhood Center. For hazmat fire department, got some money again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. Some money's going to Faxon Field. Ron, being the speaker, is able to continue to keep money going to different areas of the city overall. There's a bit of money there for financial assistance for students for Quincy College.
Yes.
So, obviously having the speaker from Quincy is a great boon for our city, and it shows. So a lot of our local projects did get funded. There was like a ferry service thing as well, on ferry service prep out in Squantum that Bruce is working on. I think on earmarks, there's some other small ones at the edges, but I think the earmarks are probably closing at over $500,000.
Okay.
Which is pretty good. It's a tight budget still, but for a city, that's pretty well done. And people should be aware that Ron also represents Weymouth and Holbrook, and Bruce represents Randolph. So I don't really look in those communities because obviously I'm a Quincy rep.
Right.
But Randolph and Holbrook also benefited from Ron as well, and Bruce is part of leadership, so Randolph also receives benefits. So again, having such a big leadership team south of Boston really does reap its rewards.
Sure. How is unemployment shaping up these days?
It's about 6.8%. Quincy's a little bit over, around 7%. It's holding fairly steady. I think once we get to a hospitality season, places in the Cape is booked through the summer. Berkshire's, I'm hearing, is booked through the summer. So that should help out. But there's employment problems because of COVID. So, for example, the fishing industry, for example, the hospitality industry, particularly the Cape, relies on international summer assistance. These are temporary workers that come in for the summer, make a lot of money, work a lot of hours. When I mean a lot of hours, I mean like 75 hours a week situation. Yeah. And, they make, good money and they go home. Because of COVID, again, immigration laws in this country is totally screwed up. Getting these temporary workers, is going to be very problematic for the Cape. And they already seen the booking, so they're just getting ready for the big tide starting Memorial Day weekend. So maybe unemployment numbers may go down, but I think it's going to stay really steady until we get our international travelers back.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. You know, I'm also obviously promoting the film industry through the film tax credit, which I get a lot of news on too, because they're a huge part of our hospitality industry. I mean, one film, Don't Look Up, leaves over 15,000 plus hotel rooms. You know, right now, because there's no travel, no conventions, no tourists, um, hotels are suffering hard. So, you know, the film industry coming here to use our hospitality infrastructure is now more crucial than ever.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. Absolutely. It'll be curious to see also how it impacts public transportation going forward. You know, we've talked about this before, but I don't think they really know right now what the outcome is going to be.
Absolutely correct. You know, the federal money has kept the T from getting worse in terms of budgetary matters and service cuts. But again, if there's nobody on the train or the bus, you're not making any money, right? This ain't hard math, folks. So the real question down the road is, you know, whether or not people actually go back to work in Boston that are predominantly white collar workers. And you know, there was an interview with Mayor Janey I watched this week, who still holds a degree of optimism that it can return to some normality in Boston regarding workers coming back and stimulating their local economy, because that's a big part of Boston's economy. Everybody that comes in from Quincy to go to work buys lunch or hangs around, you know, after work, for example, get a drink, or decides to go to the Red Sox game from work on the train, is a big part of the Boston economy, right? Yeah. So, but if we're not coming to work, that's, you know, hurts them a lot. So, you know, we shall see. But I still feel that about 30% of the white collar workforce is not going back to the city.
Wow, that's significant. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see the migration of home ownership right now. There's huge demand but not enough supply, as people continue to flee Boston because of COVID. People need a yard. People can't, you know, be cooped up. I know some folks listening have probably been trapped in their apartments, you know, the condo complexes, particularly with vertical living, for like months, as opposed to living in, you know, single family home or a 2-family home where you have a yard.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been bidding wars, as you're well aware. People buying things sight unseen, just off the internet. It's really getting like the Wild West.
No, you're absolutely correct. And you know, having, you know, being cooped up in a building that potentially could be fully COVID infected, and you got money. You got the money to do it. They're doing it. You're going to get out of the city of Boston.
Right.
So that also impacts the Boston economy too, and utilization in BTA. One of the reasons people live in Boston is they don't want to drive. You know, the T's right there. Most people with wealth, which is kind of odd because it used to be the MBTA. Remember when the MBTA used to be about working class people, where
yes.
they picked the worst neighborhoods for the T to be in, and now it's like the 100% opposite, where
yes.
only wealthy people can live near the T. I mean, yeah, it's.
You're right. It's absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if people have talked. That hasn't been talked about a whole lot, but you're absolutely right. It is true.
Yeah. And the T's are fixed costs. But if you are making like, you know, $300,000 a year or $1 million a year living in Boston next to a T station, and you're paying the same price as somebody from a poor neighborhood, there's something wrong with this picture, right? But that's a lot of conversation.
Unless you're, you know, ultra wealthy and have your own limo and or your own private jet or something.
Yeah, but you're cheap. We'll just jump on the T that's like 3 steps from your home. I mean, it's, again, that's a larger conversation about where our society is going in terms of urban development, and
right.
how public transit is not about working folks anymore in certain parts of the state. So, you know, we'll see how it plays out. I mean, it's a lot of question marks about that still. I mean, I know that we got $1 million for technical development for electric buses in Quincy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, MBTA is still looking to go to the Lowe's site in Quincy as the permanent new bus depot. The new electric buses will fit there, or hybrid buses, hopefully electric, but I still believe it will be hybrid for a while on the way to electric.
Yeah.
Unless technology changes really fast, which may. I mean, technology is moving really fast, but my hope is at least get hybrid, or my hope is to get a new bus. I mean, our buses here are ancient. But I mean, these are all good things moving forward. You know, trying to get the city gradually to the 21st century in different spots of it. But yeah, I don't know how the T is going to be in the big term, because it is basically common sense. If you're trapped in a train of people, your chance of getting sick is pretty good. And I still think there's people who can avoid riding the T, will avoid riding the T still because of fear of COVID.
Yeah, until the numbers with the vaccines improve even more, I think you're right. That's what you're going to see for sure.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's the one area where social distancing is very problematic, and everybody knows it.
I think it'll be the last place you'll see the mask mandate be removed, probably.
And I agree with that.
Yeah.
I absolutely 100% agree with that. We were trapped in a train car or a bus where the doors and windows don't open, and you're going to be in a enclosed space, for a long period of time, because long, in my sense, is more than 10 minutes these days regarding the potential of infection. Um, yeah, I think it's going to be. I think people would really have this hard time mentally to just take their chances. I just can't explain it another way. Even
Right.
vaccination, you still can you still can't get infected. The goal is not to have you die or be seriously injured. So one of the obviously my frustrations all the years, like, oh well, nobody can get sick. The death rate's like 2%. I'll be fine. And I'm like, yeah, but you look at the severe rate, it's like 10-15%. That will crash. That crashes the hospital system. So people are acting like, oh well, I won't die. It's only 2% chance. I'm like, you're missing the point.
Right.
The point is to keep you out of a hospital, so you don't destroy the hospital system. Because we were at 90% in this latest wave, like consistently. We weren't that far from the thing crashing. We just got lucky twice because the first time, with the hospital capital planet, and we just basically redirected all our money, like all of it, Medicare money, community health center money, loose change. I mean, just dumped it all into the hospital system to try to keep it from crashing. And then because of the first wave, we were able to be better prepared this winter. But even then, we were very close to the top of the cup here, and try to keep it flowing. So that's why this vaccine is important. It's not about the 2% death.
Right.
It's trying to keep the healthcare system from crashing.
Right. Because then you get into a situation where you have a bad car accident or a natural disaster or house fire or something, you can't get care.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
You'd be triaged and sitting on the outside of a hospital watching your loved one, third-degree burns or a broken leg, or you have a heart attack. You can't get into the hospital. And then and if it's true overflow, that closes down the community health centers as well, because that's what we're preparing for. Those, we hit the brim. Community hospitals were up next. Community health centers were up next for triage. They were all prepared for COVID patients. So, the governor probably could have took over the private healthcare systems like Atrius Healthcare too, if we really needed to. We just use executive orders and emergency powers and just take them over if he had to. As another potential triage, like the ones like the Quincy Center, Atrius Healthcare, for example. He probably could do that if he needed to.
Mm-hmm.
So thankfully it didn't come to that level, but get vaccinated, folks. I mean, if you're not fearing death, then you should fear that you're really hurt, and God forbid we're in another wave and you and your loved one died not because of COVID, because there's no space in the hospital for you.
Right, exactly. Yep. We don't want to get to that point ever, for sure. Anything else we should touch on today, think, Techie?
Well, we touched on a lot. It's been a busy week, and it's going to be busy next week too. When I looked at my calendar, meeting schedule is pretty high up. I just encourage people again. I mean, Asian American Pacific Island Month is rolling around. The House Asian Caucus, the start of social media came to do Buy Asian Month as part of AAPM month, because we can't do no more celebrations like we do on other years. We lost, obviously, last year to COVID, and the Asian-owned businesses have suffered the longest, because people weren't showing up in Chinatown in January. I mean, before COVID really started rolling, because of racism, and just lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
So, if people can, promote maybe one Asian-owned business on social media, I think they're a long way to support the Asian American community. I do encourage people to go to Channel 5 Chronicle to watch the segment they have there that talks about Asian American issues and racism. It is a bit long, but do so. And again, I mean, I've been saying this before, if you have Amazon Prime, please do rent Watching Asian Americans. It gives you a good 5 hours of general conversation in like a nutshell format for people to learn about Asian American history in the United States. It doesn't hit every single detail, but it gives you a good overview on the brush of the whole thing, as well as real story lives about Asians that fought in Vietnam. Koreans. I'm sorry, it's what was it? Filipino, Chinese, and Japanese were a large chunk of the Vietnam effort, but U.S. soldiers. Same thing in World War II. Chinese, Filipinos, and Japanese fought in World War II. The LA riots. Those of us old enough remember the LA riots. It goes into quite a bit of depth about that, and even talk about stories. A few stories about Vietnamese refugees that came here that fought for the U.S. who are being stabbed on the streets because they're Vietnamese because of the Vietnam War. Imagine that, folks. Imagine you come to a country and you were forced to leave it. It wasn't like a voluntary exit, and because you chose for democracy, and you come to this country and the residents beat you.
Is there a resource that will list, Asian-owned businesses or any minority-owned businesses for that matter, locally or across the state that you're aware of, Jackie?
No, I mean, here's a good one too. When the city did their restaurant list last summer to do takeout, they left out all the Asian restaurant owners.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had to call Quincy Asian Resources to do a list, and within a week, they adopted the Quincy Asian Resource list to do that. You want to talk about systemic racism? There's one easy example of that, right? So I just ignore a whole bunch of business owners, which is 30% of the city at this point. So no, unfortunately, there isn't an Asian-owned business resource guide. And I say Asian-owned, it's not just restaurants and dry cleaners, folks. I mean, we're talking about accountants and the big tailor like Nam's Tailor, or the small gift shops, the knick-knack shops we have around the city.
There's construction companies I know, lawyers, doctors, certainly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if even have like a regular doctor, dentist, lawyer, accountant that you use regularly. I mean, a little social media love would be nice.
Okay.
And you go to the Asian Caucus Twitter account, Massachusetts Asian Caucus Twitter account, as the website as well, and as well as my social media. You can read stories about other Asian Americans' experiences on my social media, as well as talk about shopping Asian. I think the hashtag, because I can't remember anything right now, I think it's hashtag Stop AAPI month is the hashtag.
Okay.
I'll be making my way out of the bunker with my mask on to do some photographs of places I regularly frequent as well.
Okay, we'll look for those for sure. Good opportunity for you to give out your other contact information too.
Sure, 617-722-2014. 617-722-2014. Hit any button, we get to a staff person. We're still working remote, so leave voicemail. We'll get back to you. Again, the prioritization is based on how bad your situation is. I'm sorry to put it this way, just the way I can explain it. Obviously, you can reach my email at tacky.chan@mahouse.gov, tacky.chan@mahouse.gov. I do sort through emails a lot. And again, we rank based on priorities. And testimonies already started coming in through my email. And there is actually a testimony email on the Joint Committee on Consumer Protection website that people don't seem to want to use, but besides the point. And of course, you can see my Twitter account, at Tacky Chan, as well as my official Facebook account, State Representative Tacky Chan, for resources there. Like there's an SBA application opening on Monday.
Yes.
For restaurants. So definitely something should go onto the website, click the links to get you some of these resources if you're watching this. And that saves you a whole lot of time in terms of like calling me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great resource and there's no cost to it. And the worst they can say is no. So it's definitely worth trying.
Oh, absolutely. If definitely apply for any government assistance available, even if you think like maybe a 50-50. But you're right. There's always, you can always just say no, but if you don't try at all, you don't know if you can win.
Right. Good to see you, Tacky. Glad we're able to get together today, and next time it'll be May.
Isn't it May already? COVID May. But it's great to see you, as always, and I'm sure there'll be more things to talk about next week.
As always. All right, look forward to it. Thanks again.
Take care.